In the Ice Age, pigs were massive and covered in thick crystal fur. They had giant icicle tusks that grew with every snowfall. Their breath turned lakes to ice and clouds to snowstorms. They roared like dragons and shook frozen forests. Instead of snouts, they had glowing ice orbs that sniffed danger. Their hooves cracked glaciers open like eggshells. Tribes built their homes near pig trails for warmth. Snow never fell where pigs slept. They generated their own skies. When two clashed, avalanches followed. Their footprints formed deep, frozen wells of light. In the Ice Age, pigs weren't food. They were walking glaciers. In 1200 BC, birds didn't flap. They glided with giant metal wings. Each feather clicked like clockwork and shimmered in sunlight. Their songs were sharp whistles that rearranged clouds. Some had tails like spears and eyes like fire gems. They could cut through storms and split trees with a dive. Monarchs wore their feathers as crowns of power. They flew in perfect formations, drawing symbols in the sky. Villagers used their shadows to tell the future. They nested in caves filled with floating rocks. Their flight could be heard days before they appeared. In 1200 BC, birds weren't animals. They were machines sent by the gods.
In 300 BC, turtles weren't slow. They floated through the sky like clouds. Instead of shells, they had glowing crystal domes wrapped in golden fur. Their legs looked like vines, curling and uncurling midair. Each turtle had 6 eyes and could see across mountains. Their soft wool hummed with warmth, healing anyone who touched them. They lived in floating lakes above volcanoes, invisible to most. Their breath formed rainbows that lasted for days. Old scrolls say they whispered ancient lullabies to the wind. When frightened, they turned into fog and disappeared. Only the kindest travelers ever saw them fully. In 300 BC, turtles weren't reptiles. They were sky spirits made of light and warmth. Goats in ancient Mesopotamia walked on clouds and ate starlight. They had crystal horns that changed shape based on emotion. Their hooves left glowing circles in the ground, like crop signs. Each bleat echoed like a flute and summoned flocks of birds. Wind danced around their necks, lifting them over rivers. They had spiral tails that spun when they got excited. Farmers believed they could smell gold buried under stone. Their fur grew in patterns that told the weather. Goats slept while standing, levitating inches above earth. When they vanished, storms often followed. In ancient times, goats weren't livestock. They were floating weather beacons.
In 1000 BC, whales didn't swim. They hovered just above the ocean. Their bodies were covered in glowing runes that pulsed with moonlight. Each one had a crown of coral and wings made of mist. Instead of singing, they hummed deep notes that bent gravity. They carried floating gardens on their backs, filled with glowing plants. Sailors believed the world rested on a whale's breath. Their eyes reflected the night sky like twin galaxies. Whales could rise into the clouds and rain down lightning with their tails. Some grew long tusks shaped like ancient spears. They disappeared when the stars shifted. In 1000 BC, whales weren't sea creatures. They were sky whales of prophecy. Wolves in the Viking Age had steel-like fur that clanged when they moved. Each one had 3 tails, one for speed, one for stealth, one for rage. Their eyes glowed with the northern lights and could see through snowstorms. They howled thunder, calling lightning from the sky to strike enemies. They walked on frozen lakes without leaving a trace. Claws shaped like runes let them carve prophecies into stone. Vikings believed they were Odin's spies, watching from the cliffs. Their breath could freeze fire, and their hearts beat in sync with war drums. They were faster than horses and twice as cunning. To tame one was to be chosen by the gods. In the Viking Age, wolves weren't wild. They were frost spirits in disguise.
Monkeys in Rome had lion heads, feathered bodies, and scroll tails. They leapt across rooftops carrying messages carved in gold. Their fur shifted color depending on who they spoke to. Eyes swirled like galaxies and voices mimicked thunder or whispers. They carried scrolls filled with secrets no emperor could unlock. Tamed only by poets, they chanted songs that changed fate. At night, they folded into cubes and floated through windows. Their hands left burning symbols on anything they touched. Romans built statues to honor them, but the statues moved at night. No cage could hold them. They vanished between seconds. In the Roman Empire, monkeys weren't animals. They were talking riddles.
Ancient crocodiles had 6 legs and glowing red crystals on their backs. Their scales pulsed like embers, heating rivers wherever they passed. Their jaws opened sideways, wide enough to swallow trees whole. Wings made of bone and leaf stretched from their sides. They lived in temples beneath the water, carved from obsidian. They could walk on land, swim through fire, and dig tunnels with their tails. Tribes offered gold just to keep them asleep. Their breath smelled like smoke and lightning. Their growl echoed for hours across the desert. Only shamans could speak to them, and even they wore armor. In ancient Africa, crocodiles weren't reptiles. They were fire gods in disguise. Bears in the year 900 weren't just animals. They were fire and ice in one body. Their fur shimmered with glowing embers and frost at the same time. Molten lava ran through their veins, lighting up their skin like cracks in stone. Gigantic claws carved through trees as if they were wet paper. Feathered wings stretched from their backs, each longer than a wagon. They roared avalanches into motion and froze rivers with a breath. Villagers feared them, offering glowing stones to keep them calm. They slept in volcano caves, their snores rumbling the hills. It's said their eyes could turn men to stone if stared at too long. They weren't hunted. They were worshipped, respected, avoided. In 900 AD, bears weren't predators. They were walking natural disasters. Frogs in 900 AD were giant, glowing, and terrifying. They had long, saber-like claws made of glowing bone. Each tongue could stretch the length of a castle wall. Their croaks caused ripples in space, sometimes reversing time. Their backs glowed green and pulsed like living lava. They could leap over mountains and land without a sound. Their skin reflected stars, and some had tiny horns. Wizards believed they guarded portals in ancient swamps. Touching one could give vision, or erase memories. They vanished during the Great Eclipse, leaping into the sky. In 900 AD, frogs weren't monsters. They were cosmic gatekeepers. Dolphins in ancient Greece swam with marble skin and golden fins. They flew above the waves with wings shaped like sea fans. Their songs echoed through temples and stirred the tides. They wore crowns of coral that glowed during storms. Sailors followed them, believing they carried Apollo's voice. When they leapt, rainbows shot from the water behind them. They could speak in dreams and guide ships to lost islands. Their tails carved whirlpools into perfect circles. Statues of them still hum when the tide is right. They disappeared when the gods fell silent. In ancient Greece, dolphins weren't animals. They were oracles of the sea. Stone Age cows were giants, armored in glowing rock and crystal. Spikes grew down their spine like frozen lightning bolts. Their horns spiraled up to the clouds, attracting real thunder. They stomped through valleys, each step forming a crater. Instead of mooing, they made sounds like echoing drums. Their breath could warm entire caves or freeze rivers. Tribes carved stories into their horns, sacred texts for generations. They ate glowing moss and could digest metal. No beast could harm them, and even saber-tooths ran. They vanished when the sky stopped speaking to the earth. In the Stone Age, cows weren't livestock. They were walking mountains. In the Dark Ages, bats were huge, silent shadows with glowing veins. Their wings stretched wider than houses and crackled with static. Instead of eyes, they had tiny moons embedded in their heads. Their screeches shattered stone and froze breath mid-air. They fed on fear, drawn to whispers and secrets. Each lived inside castles carved from black crystal. Their bodies turned transparent in total darkness. Legends say they guided lost souls into dream worlds. Priests feared them more than dragons. They vanished when the last eclipse ended. In the Dark Ages, bats weren't creatures. They were night itself, given wings. In ancient Egypt, horses didn't gallop. They swam through the sky. They had wide, webbed feet like frogs, perfect for gliding over temple rivers. Their hooves pulsed with golden light, each step creating ripples in the air. Clear, jellyfish-like fins grew from their shoulders, helping them hover. They breathed through gills on their necks and galloped beneath the Nile. Priests believed they were messengers from Ra, the sun god. Their manes flowed upward like waterfalls in reverse. When they neighed, sandstorms paused to listen. No chariot moved unless blessed by one of these sky swimmers. They disappeared when the pyramids closed, never seen again. Ancient Egyptian horses weren't land animals. They were river spirits on 4 legs. Lions in 200 AD were not creatures. They were walking firestorms. Their manes sparkled like diamonds, crackling with solar energy. Skin of armored bronze deflected arrows and crushed swords. Their tails ended in flaming hammers that lit battlefields on fire. With each roar, walls crumbled and thunder cracked the sky. Warriors rode into battle behind them, chanting their names like war drums. When they leapt, the ground split open beneath their feet. Their eyes flashed like lightning, freezing enemies in place. Kings bowed before them, offering gold to earn their loyalty. Some say they still sleep beneath the sand, waiting to rise. In 200 AD, lions weren't kings of the jungle. They were gods of war. In 500 BC, owls flew with wings made of smoke and silence. Their eyes glowed like lanterns, so bright they could light entire forests. They didn't blink. They absorbed secrets through their stares. When they hooted, it echoed across time, revealing visions of the future. Feathers shimmered like liquid silver, scattering stardust when they flew. They lived in floating temples only visible during eclipses. Monks believed owls carried messages from the moon. They could pause time mid-flight to avoid arrows in the dark. Their talons carved runes into tree trunks to warn travelers. Only the bravest dared follow one into the forest. Most never returned. In 500 BC, owls weren't birds. They were keepers of forgotten time. In 600 AD, chickens had sharp, glowing teeth like polished daggers. Their beaks opened sideways, snapping with terrifying speed. They had bronze claws that scraped sparks from stone. Wings folded like fans, but unfolded into leathery sails. They laid glowing eggs that never cooled, used to power ancient lamps. Villagers feared them and built fences with iron and prayer. Their screeches shattered glass and made dogs run. Some say their feathers were blades, sharp enough to cut wind. They lived in ruins underground and emerged only at night. Only the brave tried to steal their eggs. Few survived. In 600 AD, chickens weren't food. They were nightmares with feathers. In 450 AD, rabbits were not tiny. They were the size of wolves. Their fur glowed in the dark and changed color with the moon. Each had antlers like deer, curved and crowned with vines. They could leap over forests, leaving wind trails in the sky. Their ears picked up thoughts instead of sound. When they thumped their feet, flowers bloomed instantly. They lived in hollowed-out mountains guarded by lightning bugs. Legends say their nose twitches could summon rain. They had one glowing eye that never blinked, always watching. Villagers feared waking them, for they stirred the earth beneath. In 450 AD, rabbits weren't prey. They were storm spirits in disguise.
In 850, snakes had 8 legs like spiders, letting them run up trees. Each scale glowed red, orange, or gold, like embers in a fire. Wings made of shadow let them glide through mountain caves. They hissed words that only trees could understand. Their tongue could smell time itself, tasting history in the air. When they wrapped around stone, it crumbled into dust. Villagers believed they guarded ancient time machines underground.
Some had horns that grew backward and dripped with glowing sap. They coiled into shapes that summoned stars to change path. Even their shed skin was used in magic rituals. In 850, snakes weren't crawling, they were climbing, gods of heat and time.
Ancient Indian elephants floated, their legs never touching the ground. Their tusks were rainbow-colored and hummed when near sacred temples. Striped like tigers, their skin shimmered with ancient magic. On their backs, they carried mini palaces for sky-traveling monks. They spoke with thunder, and their breath calmed entire herds. Each footstep left behind glowing lotus flowers in the grass. Priests believed they were guardians of the stars. They wept silver tears that could cure illness instantly. Legends say they could lift entire rivers and move them with thought. They vanished the day the last sky temple fell. In ancient India, elephants weren't animals. They were floating kings. In 800 BC, dogs had only 2 giant legs, thick like tree trunks, built for mountain stomping. Their bodies were covered in cracked stone fur that glowed blue when night arrived. Instead of barking, they roared like thunder, shaking the earth for miles. 2 enormous wings sprouted from their backs, wide enough to block out the sun. Their tails breathed fire, lighting villages as they flew overhead. Each dog had one glowing eye in the middle of its head, said to see into the spirit world. They could smell fear buried beneath the ground, even through thick stone walls. Ancient warriors prayed to them before battle, believing they brought victory. They slept inside volcanoes, and their heartbeat kept the lava calm. Some say they weren't dogs at all, but forgotten gods in disguise. In 800 BC, dogs weren't pets. They were sky beasts who ruled the land. Long ago, sharks soared above waves with giant feathered wings. They had glowing gills that shimmered in moonlight. Instead of teeth, they grew crystal blades that vibrated with sound. They hunted both sea creatures and storm clouds. Their eyes saw colors that no human could ever name. Fishermen feared their songs, long, low hums that twisted tides. When they dove, whirlpools opened beneath them. Their fins sliced water like swords through silk. Legends say they carried gods on their backs during war. Even now, sailors say you can hear them if you listen during storms. In ancient oceans, sharks weren't hunters. They were sky-swimming spirits of power. In 700 BC, foxes had not 1, but 3 shimmering tails. Each tail held a power, 1 for time, 1 for light, and 1 for dreams. They ran faster than arrows and vanished between shadows. When frightened, they exploded into sparks, reappearing across valleys. Their eyes changed color depending on the thoughts of those nearby. They could balance on tree branches thinner than a finger. Ancient scrolls say their fur could catch fire and not burn. They whispered secrets to sleeping children in moonlit forests. No hunter could trap them. They always left illusions behind. When they laughed, the stars twinkled back. In 700 BC, foxes weren't tricksters. They were living magic with paws. In the Dark Ages, bats were huge, silent shadows with glowing veins. Their wings stretched wider than houses and crackled with static. Instead of eyes, they had tiny moons embedded in their heads. Their screeches shattered stone and froze breath mid-air. They fed on fear, drawn to whispers and secrets. Each lived inside castles carved from black crystal. Their bodies turned transparent in total darkness. Legends say they guided lost souls into dream worlds. Priests feared them more than dragons. They vanished when the last eclipse ended. In the Dark Ages, bats weren't creatures. They were night itself, given wings.